We're holding the Gemorah page 99b. Let's bring up the page here. Hold on. Okay. Okay, we're holding an interesting part of the Gemara now. We're on page 99b. Towards the top of the page, the line on the actual Gemara finishes off Tana Rabbanan. Okay, so we're holding out someone who is Dvar Hashem Baza, a person who is sort of say shaming the word of God, and we're going to move from there on to the description who is considered an apokoros, who's considered a person who's Megal Panim Shabbat Torah, different levels of heretics, and other interesting Gemaras as we move along in this fascinating Preke Chelek. So the Gemara says like this: Tanu Rabbanan, our rabbis have learned. Okay, we're going to talk about now Menashe, king of Yehuda. His father was Chizkiyahu HaMelech. So his father was the great righteous King Chizkiyahu HaMelech. He got married late in his life. He had a son, two sons. I think one died. The other one was Menashe, who was, I think, king at a very young age in his before his bar mitzvah. I think 8 or 9, because his father again had him at a late age. His grandfather was Yeshaya Hanavi, Menashe's grandfather, and he started off to be a really bad king. Evidently, he was taken captive in the middle by the Babylonians. He did tshuva, he did repentance, not 100%. We're going to see later, I think he's one of those mentioned that possibly doesn't have a portion in the world to come. He was very long king, but there was major corruption, and kind of after they only had maybe Yeshayahu as the final positive king, but his grandson, but it wasn't really, it didn't work. It kind of was fizzled out, the kingdom of David, leading to the destruction of the temple after that. So maybe 50, 60 years later. Okay, so Tana Rabbanan, the rabbis have learned like this. So they're going to attribute the pasuk, if someone does something in high-handedly, biyad rama is high-handedly, which is a way of chutzpah, right? So who is this? Who is this referring to? This is this verse, and it could have been other candidates that we know in our history. This is referring to Menashe ben Chizkiyahu. Menashe, the son of Chizkiyahu, meaning the king of Yehuda. You have to remember, Chizkiyahu started a revolution in Torah study. There's one of the greatest, glorious times of the Jewish history in Torah study, where the Jewish people were very knowledgeable in the study of Torah. And the Gemara says, did Chizkiyahu not teach his son Menashe? He did teach him. So Menashe knew Torah. It wasn't that he was an ignoramus, but he was biyad rama. He went against Torah in a chutzpah way, in a high-handedly way. So this is why the verse is referring to Menashe. He would go and sit and teach flawed narratives of the Torah. Means he would purposely corrupt the meaning of the Torah. Biyad Rama, the reason why it's brought down is the Yad Rama brings down. Why does it say Yad Rama? Is the idea of high-handedly means that he did it b'mezid. He did it on purpose. It wasn't like he was a tinik shenishba, he didn't know better. So Rabbi Steinzalt says, some explain that the Menashe did not merely note that these verses were superfluous, he also added his own commentary. It means we're going to see things that he asked, and then he gave his own commentary, which was flawed interpretation of the Torah narratives mentioning in the Gemara. So he went and said, he questioned the Gemara. He's going to go and sort of say, mock the Torah. And he mocks, what he's going to mock is what he finds as unnecessary parts of the Torah. And what are those two parts that he says? So it says, Amar, he said like this, He's saying this mockingly. Did Moshe not have to write, so to say? Timna, we find when we go through the different alufim, the different captains, so to say, or chiefs of the family of Esav, the Torah goes and tells us that the sister of Lotan was Timna. He found that unnecessary for the Torah to say that, and like Rabbi Steinzalt said, he gave his own interpretation, not the interpretation of the rabbis. Timna haisi pilegesh lalifas, and what happened to Timna was the pilegesh the concubine of Eliphaz, who was the son of Asa, the grandson of Yitzchak. So that he found that was an unnecessary addition in the Torah. Then he found a challenge with what the Torah says, Vayelech Ruvain, b'mei kitzir chitim, that Ruvain went in the time when they were cutting the wheat, so to say the spring. V'yimtza Duda'im basada, and he found Duda'im. What's what Duda'im is? He found Duda'im, a kind of flower or plant in the field. And we know the story that he brought it to his mother Leah. Rachel did not have any children. She asked for the Duda'im, and in exchange for Yaakov spending the night with Leah instead of Rachel, and that led to a lot of negative things. I mean, because we know that she had more children, Leah, and then the negative part was that's one of the reasons Rachel was not buried in the Maras HaMachpelah. So he felt, what was wrong with that verse? So seemingly you could say that the challenge was he didn't find it necessary at all to mention that whole story. Others say that wasn't the problem. The problem was, why did it have to say b'mei kitzir chitim? Why did it have to say when he did it? He just said that Reuven went and found Duda'im for his mother, and he gave it to Rachel. What's the importance for the Torah to mention the time? The Gemorah is later going to say that the fact that the Torah mentions it is to teach us that even though it was a time that he was allowed to take the flowers for free, he didn't pick chitim, he picked flowers. It means he could have. It was after the harvest, so that he was allowed to go in and take wheat. He didn't because he didn't want to even have some sort of connection to robbery. Okay, but Menashe didn't subscribe to that, obviously, the way Menashe behaved. So when he went and did this, Yotze Baskol, a voice went out from heaven, V'omra loy, and said, so to say, to Menashe, Teishev ba'achicha tedaber b'ben imcha titein daifi. The Torah says that you sit and speak against your brother, meaning Moshe Rabbeinu, and you slander your own mother's son. These things you have done, and should I have kept silent? You would imagine that I was like you, but I will reprove you and set the matter before your eyes. So he says, he spoke about the son of your mother. Do you think I'd be silent with cheresh? The think I'd be like you? I'm going to show you. The Rashi says, what was his problem? His problem was that he says, Timna. He says, why did the Torah have to tell us that Lotan's sister was Timna? And he was making fun. That Moshe wrote it was unnecessary. Later we're going to learn that this is what it means in the Mishnah. That someone who doesn't have a portion of the world to come is a person who's Megala, who's an affront to Torah, which is worse than an apokoris, than a heretic. So that is Menashe, who's mocking and mistranslating Torah. And also Vayelech Ruvain, Rashi learns of seems from Rashi that Rashi learns the whole story was unnecessary, although it's kind of necessary because it explains how Leah ended up having two more children, which were Yisachar and Zevulun, and also later it's one of the reasons why it says she didn't marry to be buried. It's one of the reasons she didn't marry to be buried with Yaakov. But there are those who say that maybe Rashi is alluding to that it wasn't so much the story, but the Yimei Chitim, at the time of the spring. Why do you have to tell us when he did it? Okay, the Gemara continues. The Olav with reference to Menashe, king of Yehuda. There's a Kabbalah which says about basically how the Yetzer Hara works, which means that it starts he gets drawn onto them who draw in iniquity with cords of vanity and sin with cart rope. That starts off with small threads of apocorsis, of questioning, of challenging, of giving into the Yetzer Hara, so to say, in a negative way. And then if you multiply a lot of threads, it comes into rope. So to Menashe started with little small things. It's always the small things. It's a small little turn you take on a road that you don't get lost right away. It takes a while. Hey, Ariel, welcome. We're holding Tzadik Tes Amid Beis 99b. So a person doesn't go off the road in it doesn't get lost immediately. It takes a small turn, small thread going off the derech, going off the way, is already is the beginning of so to say the threads turn into rope. Maika avos agala amrabasi Yitzhahara. This is referring to the Yitzhahara. Betchila daim lechut. He starts off like a thread. Shalkuvia, like a spinning, like a small little thread. Ubasayif daim la'avos agala, and turns into a thick rope of a wagon. So something that starts off, what's the big deal? A little question here, a little question there, but those threads add up. Either the thread itself turns into a rope, or multiple threads turn into rope. However, you're going to look at the translation, different translations. But the point is that that's the beginning of a person going off the derech. So he quotes Rashi, "B'chavli hashoiv b'chinam v'lei shum hana hayachaita." What does he mean? Why is it called threads of wastefulness? Shav is like wastefulness. It means he didn't even get it. There was no incentive for him to do what he was doing. Menashe ends up. We'll learn about Menashe at another time. Menashe was really out to lunch about how he was behaving in avodah zarah and murder. He was a big murderer, etc. Here he says that he had no hana. It wasn't like he had a benefit if he would accept the Torah or not. But just lahachas, so to say, just doing it to anger God, he started off with his misinterpreting and questioning the Torah. In the translations, he says, the Marsha says that why is it called a thread to rope? So the Marsha says, first, the Yitzhahara just gets you on one sin. One Avera brings another until the threads multiply. You could turn all those threads into a thick rope for a wagon, right? A wagon needs a very strong rope. But now the Gemara says, once already Menashe asked the question, the Gemara could have just said, okay, we move on. The Gemara actually says, so what is the answer to the question? Why does the Torah have to tell us that Lotan's sister is called Timna? Why is it important to know the story of Reven, or the details of the story of Reven and the Duda'im plant? So it says like this: Asin Allah. Now we're already talking about it. So now that we came to discuss it, what is the answer? So Miyas Achais Lotan Timna Mahi. What's the point of saying that Lotan's sister was called Timna? So the Gemara explains to tell us about the greatness of two things we're going to learn from this story. One is the greatness of the family of Avram Avinu, and also how one is supposed to respond sometimes to people who want to come enter the country of Shechina, like we know a little bit the story of Hillel and Shammai. So the Gemara says, Timna bas Malachim Havai. Who was Timna? She wasn't just a nobody. She was a princess. She was the daughter of kings. Tichsiv, how do we know that she's the daughter of kings? Because it says that Aluf Lotan, we call Lotan, which is her brother. A chief, Aluf is a chief. Aluf Timna, and we have the chiefs of Timna. V'chol Aluf Malchusa b'loi tagihi. What's the definition of an Aluf? So here he describes it. What does it mean, a chief? A chief is a leader. Malchusa means a king without a crown. So whatever that means, why the king wouldn't have the crown, that's another question. But that's the difference between a chief and a king. So it's malchusa b'leitaga, a king without a crown. So he says, let's see if the Mefarshim explain the idea of without a crown. No, not challenged by that at all. So Rashi says malchusa b'leitaga. What does it mean, a king without a crown? Sar gadol, a great minister, so to say. Al she'enim uter, hey Shuki. But it doesn't have a crown. Mutter means doesn't have a covering. Rashi says, if Timna was the brother of a king, though a king without a crown, but a chief, so surely she was the sister of a king, so then she was the daughter also. What would make Lotan a king? Because his father was a king. So their father was a king, means she was a daughter she was a daughter of kings. And what is the idea? So what's the story here? What's the unwritten story, so to say, of Timna? Is she came to convert. Means she wanted to join the entourage of Avram, right? She wanted to join the people that were influenced by Avram. Avram, she came first to Avram. Hey, Danny, she came first to Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. So she went to Yaakov as well. They wouldn't accept her as a convert. We'll see why in a second. So she wasn't accepted by Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. So she said she didn't get accepted to. She understood basically. Doesn't say that she went to Esav. So Esav was already by then was not considered, so to say, a yeshiva boy by that time, and so she went and she became a concubine of Eliphaz, the son of Esav. So Eliphaz is one of the elder children of Eliphaz. He was Eliphaz. We know that where we find Eliphaz, although of course Eliphaz is the ancestor of Amalek, our long life enemy. But Eliphaz was brought up in Yitzchak's house, and it says that's why he didn't kill Yaakov when he chased Yaakov. Esav sent Eliphaz to chase down Yaakov when he ran away from their parents to go to Lavan. Eliphaz doesn't do it; he just takes his money because he thought was an anical of Yitzchak. He was a grandson of Yitzchak, and he had some sort of compassion. But she said, Amra. So Timna said, "Mutaf shivcha le'umazu." She'd rather be a maidservant because a concubine is not a respectable position, right? She wasn't a queen or a princess or a, so to say, a wife even of Eliphaz. She'd rather be a maidservant to the Jewish people because at the end of the day, Eliphaz was part of the family, even if he wasn't part of the, so to say, respectable part of the family, respectable line. She'd rather have some sort of connection to the descendants of Avram, Yitzchak, and Eliphaz wasn't related to Yaakov; he was a nephew. But Veloite Gevira, not to be a sort of say a lady, Lumacheres in for another nation. Nafik mina Amalek. And so what's the Gemorah say? Because of this whole story, from her comes Amalek. Because Eliphaz is the father through Timna of Amalek, and Amalek becomes the Tza'arinu Yisrael, right? This is the story of Purim. The people who oppress for ages, and there's no other nation that has the, so to say, the Timcha, like the law, which we're learning now in Rambam of eradicating Amalek, that comes from that story. My time, what was the reason? The Gemorah says that from her comes Amalek. Where's the justice here? So the Gemorah answers the la yiboilu l'rachaka, because it's a punishment to Avram and Yitzchak and Yaakov for pushing her away. Why didn't they? Should have accepted? She came to convert. She came to join the right part of the family, and by not accepting, so she went to Eliphaz, and Eliphaz of Esav, and then comes in the Amalek. And why was that a punishment? That from her specifically comes the tyrant to the Jewish people, because they shouldn't have pushed her away. L'rachaka means to distance her. So Rashi says, Mutav she'ashivcha le'umazu. She said, I'd rather be a maidservant to this nation, meaning to the descendants of Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Livnei Avram, Yitzchak. Yaakov is in parentheses because she doesn't become part of Yaakov's family. She'en yira shemayim, that they are God-fearing. Giveres l'uma, shouldn't be a lady to another nation. L'kach nasis pelegish Eliphaz. Therefore, she was ready to compromise. You have to understand, she wasn't even accepted as a wife in Esav's family. Ben Esav Shayimizar Yitzchak, because like this, she was connected to the descendants of Yitzchak. So the Gemara says, what was the problem? The Rashi says, the Gemara felt they should have converted her. Now, what does conversion mean in those times? Obviously, it was before Matan Torah, but that means that to accept them under the family of, so to say, of Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. The Yavit says that why didn't they really accept her? Well, I mean, the Yavit says, why would they not accept her? It wasn't like they were so picky. They had other people. She could have, because she was a princess, she could have had an agenda. And her agenda was she wanted to marry Avram, Yitzchak, or Yaakov. And because she wanted to marry them, it's like a woman who wants to convert for marriage. Till today, that's something that's discouraged. And therefore, they didn't want to accept it. That's what the Yavit says. Rabbi Steinzas is going to bring down, I think, a few other ideas. So Rabbi Steinzas says, she came to convert, and they did not accept her. Some say that they did not accept her due to her flawed lineage, as Timna was a mamzeres. The one thing was she wasn't for herself from a legitimate marriage. she was a bastard. Others explain that she was not accepted because her intention in converting was to marry one of the patriarchs, and thus those who convert for the purpose of marriage are not accepted. So therefore, she wasn't accepted because she had an agenda. So he does quote the Ivids. The loy boiler so what's the punishment? The punishment was, although the sages generally oppose attempts by Jews to initiate conversion, if a Gentile or a woman initiates conversion on his or her own, one should seek to accept it. That's a Tosfos. I'm not sure where this Tosfos is. It's not in our Gemorah, but it must be another Tosfos somewhere else. That she would have that because she on her own came, they didn't go out there and promote, but she came herself. That they should have accepted her, notwithstanding of let's say her being a mamzeres or of her agenda to marry. Okay. Again, you have to remember, you could go either way over here in the story because she was a mamzeres, or she was also a princess. Okay. So what was the other issue that Menashe had? The other issue Menashe had was that he didn't like the story of Ruvain that went out in the days of the wheat harvest. So Amar Rava, Rabbi Yitzchak Amar Rav, Rava, the son of Rabbi Yitzchak, said in the name of Rav, Mikan Tzadikim, from this we see, from Ruvain, that She'ein Poishtin Deim Begazel. So he didn't steal, because he could have really, after the harvest, he could have went in after them and taken wheat. But wheat would have been obviously maybe a more preferable gift for his mother than the Duda'im. And instead, Vayimtzu Duda'im Basada, he took something that was for everyone to pick, which were Duda'im. We'll see in a second what Duda'im are. And the Gemara asks, what are Duda'im? Ma Duda'im, Amarav Yavruche, they are Yavruche. So we'll see in a second what that is. And Levi says Sigle, kind of violets. And Rabbi Yonasan says Saviske. I think Yavruche is a mandrake. How do you pronounce it? It's and that would explain why mandrake. That would explain why I think this is the plant. Why Rachel wanted it. See, this is the plant. The top over here, that's the fruit. This is the plant. This is the root. Evidently, the root of the mandrake has some sort of fertility, and that's why maybe Rachel wanted it, because she wanted to have children. It's supposed to be some sort of segula, I think, even in the world for fertility, and then maybe that's why Rachel wanted those Duda'im from Reven or from Leah. And so those are that's so that's so to say why that's the story, so to say, why he did, Menashe didn't see it important to tell the story, but the Torah wanted to teach us that even at Tzaddik, that the Tzaddik could have taken the wheat, he didn't. That's why he says, make yitzir chitim, after it's already harvest, then you could go into once the harvest, and it's not like you can't go into the field. The fields are kind of open to the public. Nevertheless, he took a yavruche. He says, lo yispar shmahi. He doesn't know what the yavruche is, but again, I think Rabbi Steinsaltz is going to explain this in a second. Sigule is a kind of violet. Mini acherim sigile ikre asavim v'humimini besamim v'himoy shal oisin asavim kari segel. Nami min besamim. It's a kind of fragrance. So these are fragrance flowers or nice flowers, obviously that our mother Rachel wanted to have. Before we go to Rabbi Steinsaltz, he says over here that who was it? I think the Masha says again. The question was, why does it have to tell us when he did it? That was the basically, and also the Yavruche. He quotes Yavruche is mini asavim shiturasim turas adam, like the mandrakes, however you pronounce it. Shiturasim, the root has the image of a person, like we just saw the picture. V'chol isha kara echeles mihan, if a woman who's barren who eats from them, he misaberes, she can become pregnant. That's the Yad Ramah says. So it says the Ramban and the Even Ezra on the Torah. And the difference, sigile is a kind of fragrance, is a good smelling flower. And Sabiski is also a kind of fragrance flower. Okay, so this is where we finish kind of the story of Menashe. Here he says in modern Hebrew, this is a mandrake, which is a multinational plant whose leaves branch out in a rosette on the ground. The fruits of the mandrake appear like small golden apples, like we saw in the picture before, when ripe, weighing approximately 25 grams each. I guess it's very small. They emit a pleasant, pungent fragrance also when ripening during early summer. The season of the wheat harvest, which would make sense why he took it then. There are many legends surrounding the plant, mostly concerning its roots, whose appearance evokes the image of a person. Throughout many generations, the root of the mandrake was a talisman for fertility. Sigle is violets, and Yavruche is, he says, an Arabic word, also meaning a mandrake. Saviche is related to a Persian fruit. Okay. The Gemorah continues. Omer Rabbi Alexandri. And we're going to a new part of the Gemorah. Rabbi Alexandria said, again, the name is Alexander. He says, whoever, this is a big deal, whoever studies Torah for the sake of Torah, Lishma means you don't have an agenda. So by studying Torah Lishma, you make peace between the upper entourage, Pamay Shamayla, Pamay Shamata, the lower entourage. Shnemer, like he quotes the verse and says, this is not just the studying of Torah, but the Torah Lishma, for the sake of Torah. Like he quotes the pasuk in Yeshaya that says, Oy yachazek b'mu'azi yaseh shalom, li shalom yaseh li. It says 2 times shalom. Let him take hold of my stronghold. Mu'uzi is from the word oiz, that he may make peace with me, he shall make peace with me. So 2 pieces, peace shalom l'mayla and shalom l'mata. And that's talking about a person. Mu'uzi is ein oiz ela Torah, right? Oiz is Torah. So through Torah, and it's lishma, makes peace in heaven and in earth. Mu'uzi, he says, is Torah, like the word oiz. Hashem oiz la'ama yitain, right? It says when they heard Matan Torah, the whole world heard the Matan Torah. There was thunder, lightning, a lot of commotion in the whole world. They came running to Eiv. He says, what's going on? He says, they came running to Bilam. It says Hashem oiz la'ama yitain. Bilam said that. And shalom tartizim, it says 2 times peace. Echad l'mayl v'echad l'mata, 1 above and 1 below. He also says, he quotes, we're going to go to Rabbi Steinsaltz in a second, the Ad Ramah. He also quotes, the Aruch says, why is it making peace above and peace below? We all know the Medrash. That Moshe Rabbeinu came to receive the Torah. The Malachim said, no, why are you giving your hod? Why are you giving your honor to the people that are going to keep the Torah, not keep the Torah, the challenges, etc.? Give the Torah b'shamayim, give the Torah to the angels. And that's the famous thing, the Medrash, and God told Moshe he has to answer, and he said, you have jealousy, you've been in Egypt, you have parents, the laws in a spiritual way is not what the Torah is meant for. The Torah meant for practical laws, dealing with practical issues of jealousy, anxiety, respecting your parents, respecting each other, finding the love within you, the challenges that the humans have, not the angels. So if you don't learn Torah Lishma, the Aruch says, so the question of the angels is still there. It means when you take something from someone else, when the angels feel that it belongs to them, so they're still questioning. Moshe answered, but they may not have accepted the answer. When you learn Torah Lishma, you're proving Moshe's answer. That Moshe was right, that even in this world, with all its challenges, notwithstanding of all the distractions, we still learn Torah for the sake of learning Torah. That makes shalom in the upper entourage. Why? The angels accept Moshe's answer. So that's what he says. When God wanted to give the Torah to the Jewish people, there was a kitruk. The Malachim said, "What's going on? We want to have the right? It's brought down. When we learn Torah for the sake of Torah, it's not for an agenda. See, if we learn Torah, it's not that we learn Torah. The point over here is the Lishma again, for the sake of Torah. If you learn Torah for an agenda, then Torah becomes like anything else of the world that's agenda-based. We work for agenda. All the other issues that we struggle with in this world is agenda-based. So then what was the point of giving the Torah to the people? They brought Torah down. But if you elevate yourself to Torah Lishma, so then you're making peace. That's an answer to the Malachim. Shuvein Malachim Kitrik. But when you learn Torah Lishma, then they have nothing to say. And they're, so to say, at peace with God's decision. That's the Riaf says. And also, B'mali Shemaila is others that it gives nachas to Hashem, and it also brings chusim for the person. So above could also be talking about God is happy and you'll be happy, because by through learning Torah Lishma brings chusim to the person. Let's see over here. Peace in heavenly entourage means that there's no need to punish sinners. He calls about the Ramah. That means God overlooks the sin. It means if there's no sin, there's nothing to punish. We're talking about where there is sin, and it overrides the punishment. We know the power of Torah. And peace in the earth, in the earthly entourage means that due to the merit of one's studies of Torah for its own sake, there is peace in the place where he lives. That brings peace, shalom in the house, shalom in your community. If you see that there's a machlekes in a community, then maybe look into if people there study Torah Lishma. Okay, that's just a side note. Rav says, what does this mean? As if you built a palace in the higher realms and in the lower realms. Like it says about learning Torah Lishma. So it says, "Va'asim dvarai beficha." You put my words, the words of Torah, in your mouth. U'betzel yadei kisisicha. I'll cover you with my protection. Like a tzel is a shadow. So lintaya shemaim l'saydar. It's in heaven and in earth. Lintaya is the plant and foundation, and plant in heaven and the foundation in earth. So that's talking about Platrin, that is a tzel, which is a place of refuge. Rabbi Yochanan Amar, Af Megan al Kol Olam Kulai. Someone who learns Torah Lishma, the whole world is protected. It's a bit of a issue coming up now in Eretz Yisrael, where there's a lot of questioning about the studying of Torah and the necessity of the studying of Torah versus other things. So we're going to see this Gemorah makes the argument for studying Torah. Rabbi Yochanan says, Af Megan al Kol Olam Kulai. The whole world is protected because of the study of Torah Lishma, for the sake of Torah. Shnemer, as it says, B'tzel yadi kisisicha. B'tzel yadi, with the shadow of the Torah, from the God's protection from the Torah, is kisisicha. He's protecting us. Levi, another opinion, says, Af mikar v'segula. If you learn Torah Lishma, it is going to bring it's going to hasten the coming of the Mashiach. Shnemer v'leimer litzion amiyata. You're my people. Again, you're saying Zion, my people, again, to bring God back to Zion. One of the explanation is, why is it Makar of the Geula? So someone says a good word, and I think it's on this idea. Someone says a good word that says that whoever says Torah, repeats an idea of Torah in the name of the person who said it, is going to bring Geula La'olam, right? I think it's Gemorah and Brachas. So if you say B'Shem, how do we know it? We know it from this week's parsha, right? It says V'Tomer Esther B'Shem Mordechai. It says in the holiday of Purim that Esther told in the name of Mordechai. From this we learn that you have to quote the person you heard it from. That's the Gemorah's basis for it. So, and it says whoever does it may be Gula. Why? Because when Esther just told, what's the story? The story was Esther tells Achashverosh that Bigsan Viseresh want to kill him because he overheard the conversation that Bigsan Viseresh, everyone knows the story of the Megillah, plotted to kill Achashverosh, and it says, Esther said, name Mordechai. What is the turning point of the story of Purim? Was when at night, when Achashverosh can't sleep, and he's going through his Seif Divrei Yamim, his history books, and the story comes up of how Mordechai saved Achashverosh's life by reporting on Bigsan Viseresh, and that led things that he got upset with Haman, and one thing led to the next, and ended up bringing Geula, redemption. So the redemption of Purim technically came from Esther quoting the name of Achashverosh. So therefore the Gemara says, whoever mentions in someone's names brings a Geula, a redemption to the world. Who is a person who wouldn't quote something in someone's name? Someone who doesn't learn Torah for the sake of Torah. If you're learning Torah to build your own ego, your own so you wouldn't want to quote someone else, because then you're just repeating what someone else said. If you want people to give you attention, if you're learning Torah for the sake of kavod, respect, attention, recognition, so you would withhold this information, this idea you heard from someone else, and therefore it's not going to bring. It doesn't bring the geula. Okay, so Rashi, that's just a side. I forget who says that. Either Marsha says that or someone else. So he says, maybe the Yaakov says. Yeah, I think then Yaakov says that. So it says Palterin, he says Shomaila means palaces above and below. Like it says, Lintoya Shemaim V'Yisaydar, it's the plant in heaven and earth, and to make foundation in earth. Amrei Shlakish says, Kol HaMenamed as Ben Chaveri Torah. If you teach the child of your friends, of someone else's, obviously someone else's child, Torah. So it's not your child technically. Is ma'al v'kasav kila so. It's as if you made that person. Where do we know that? What's the quote? So the verse that we said before about Avram and Sarah, v'sanevesh asher asu b'charn. Avram and Sarah taught people Torah, brought people under the Kanfi Shechina, and therefore it says that he made them. Hanefesh asher asu b'charn. They made them. So we see that if you teach them Torah, as if that's why halachically, when it comes to kibbud avim, respecting your father and respecting your teacher, there's a lot of halachas that depending on the level of the teacher, if it's a Rebbe Muvak, etc. There's a lot of questions. Who comes first? If you find a lost item, if you have to make a choice between your father and your teacher, who do you go first, with the teacher or the father? And so what's the proof? The proof is it's a nefesh shasa b'charn, which actually brings us back to the question. It's actually a taka question. Why wouldn't they have accepted Timna? I mean, if they went out there and made tens of thousands of converts, all of a sudden Timna is the one that they're drawing the line on. It seems a little interesting. Maybe that's why we come down that she was a mamzeres. But still, that may not be obviously Hashem didn't accept that because the punishment was that Amalek came from that union between Timna and Alifas. All right, Rabbi Lezer says a person who teaches your friend's son Torah, your friend's children Torah. So ki'ilu asan l'divrei Torah. So as if you made the words of Torah. Means by teaching Torah, we're going to see in the second why. He says, you're going to make the words of Torah by teaching the words, by teaching Torah, you're making Torah. Again, it's like it says, V'talmidei yosim mikulam, right? Rava amar kilu asoy la'atzma, you made yourself. V'asisim oisam, atikri oisam al-atam, you make yourself by teaching others Torah. That's the idea of that umitalmidei yosim mikulam, that the most I learned of myself was through my students. Again, so we see there's this huge idea of teaching others Torah. So from the verse, it says Asher Asu B'char, and the people, the souls that Avram and Sarah made in Chara, the Metargamiman, the Sha'abidu Lairaisa, that the Unkeles, the translation is that he made them to Torah. Lairaisa means the Torah. B'char Le'asi, and they called them as if they made them. So by bringing them to Torah, the Torah attributes as if Sarah and Avram made these people. If you made the mitzvah itself, if you teach them Torah. All right, Omer Rabbi Abba says, there's other commentaries on these ideas, but Moshe, why does it say there's a pasuk that says we say in the davening Meiser Adam in a Behema Ayin, that a person really is no different than an animal, right? We say that always in davening Meiser Adam in a Behema Ayin. So what does change a person? What makes you an Adam from being a Behema is Torah. So when you teach someone Torah, that's key. You make that person from a Behema to a person. Okay, so he continues. He says like this. Omer Rabbi said, "Kol ha'ma'isa es chaver dvar mitzvah." If you bring someone to a mitzvah, not just the Torah study, ma'al kasakila saw as if you made the person. As if you did the mitzvah itself. Means if you bring someone else to do a mitzvah, then the mitzvah is connected to you. That's why it says it's a big deal to inspire others to do mitzvahs, especially tzedakah. Even if you don't give the charity yourself, but you inspire others, let's say you can give. You could inspire others to give. Then it's as if you're also a partner of the mitzvah. Where do we see that? We see that from the story of Moshe and Aaron, right? Moshe doesn't hit the water because Moshe was not allowed to do the first 3 plagues. But it says, God said to Moshe, take the staff that you hit the water, but he didn't hit the water. Did Moshe hit the water? We always just learned the story. Aaron did it. So this is to teach you, because Moshe instructed Aaron to do the mitzvah, is my love of Kila. So therefore Hashem attributed the mitzvah to Moshe himself. So like it says, we see clearly the Torah says that that Aaron was the one who hid it, and not Moshe. But nevertheless, the Torah says because he instructed. So a person who instructs for mitzvah, the mitzvah is attributed to him or her. Okay, now we finish now, so to say, this part of the Gemorah. Now we're going to go a little further. We have a little time. Where the Mishnah talks about those who have their share in the world to come, and the next candidate, so to say, on the list is an apikoros. The question is, what's an apikoros? There's apikoros is we always attribute apikoros to the heretic, but what does it mean to be apikoros? What defines an apikoros? So now the Gemara is going to go into that question. What is an apikoros? The famous idea that the apikoros is a person who's looking to anger God, but that's where the Gemara really attributes that to the Megalapanim the Torah. Okay, so the Gemara says Rav Reb Chanina, Amri Tevayu. They both say Zamavaza Talmid Chacham. You want to know what an apikoros is? An apikoros is if you shame a Torah scholar. End of story. Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi said. Yeshua ben Levi was a little bit before Rabbi Yochanan's time, so I think Rabbi Yochanan also learned by Rebbe, and that would explain how they're in the same time. An apikoros is, and this is a hard definition, not that you're shaming the Talmud Chacham, but you have such a disregard for the Talmud Chacham that you don't behave properly, right? If you wouldn't behave a certain way in front of someone that you respect. If you don't respect someone, so then you don't have a problem shaming someone else in front of the Talmud Chacham. So you're not shaming the Talmud Chacham himself. I didn't say anything to you, but if you really respected the Talmud Chacham, the Torah scholar, you would never shame someone else in front of the Torah scholar. It means you have a total disregard for the Torah scholar. So there's different ways of how you show it. Is it by shaming the scholar himself, or a different type of disregard is shaming someone else in front of the scholar? But the different types of disregard. So Rabbi Steinzat says, one who does this display of lack of shame in the presence of a Torah scholar, means you're not shaming the Torah scholar himself, and conducts himself as though the Torah scholar were not there, totally disregard. So that's a person who is apikoros. If the other person deserves rebuke, the Torah scholar should be the one that rebukes him. That's the number one. Who are you to rebuke in front of the Torah scholar? If he does not deserve rebuke, one must certainly refrain from sinning by treating him with contempt before the Torah scholar. So one of the two. If the person deserves to be told off, it's not your job. The Talmud Chacham is there. There's someone greater than you there. And if not, then obviously you have a total disregard. It's the question is like this, and sometimes, and this is actually I'm not sure if you want to talk about severity or not severity, but I think it's a different type of disregard. The disregard of conduct in front of someone as opposed to the disregard of conduct to someone. And the Gemorah actually tries to break it down here. So that's a lesser of the two by shaming a friend in front of in front of a Torah scholar. So that is a disrespect, so to say, but not really directed directly at the Talmud Chacham. That would be the lesser of the two, or not for Koros. So then we could say, have a mevaza Talmud Chacham atzma, but if I do shame the Talmud Chacham, the Torah scholar himself, and that would be the megala panim Torah shalai kalacha. That would be the one who interprets the Torah inappropriately. Means that we had two peoples that don't have a share of the world to come. One is lesser than the next, the apikoros, and the one who's what's called megala panim Torah shalai kalacha. The actual translation means that you interpret the Torah not according to the law. But we could attribute that to someone who disrespects the Talmud Chacham, because you're shaming the Talmud Chacham, the Torah scholar, is shaming his knowledge. But if according to the opinion that the one who shames the Torah scholar is himself the apikoros, or herself the apikoros, so what would be the definition of a person who misinterprets the Torah? So the Gemara says that's someone who goes even further, like Menashe and Chizkiyahu. What's the difference of Menashe and Chizkiyahu? Because we said Biyad Rama. Biyad Rama means he was the king, and so he had the power. It's there's basically the difference between the student who misinterprets the Torah or the teacher who misinterprets the Torah. Menashe was the king, and that's a much higher level of corruption. Most societies that go off Torah doesn't start from the students; it starts from the teachers. So therefore, that would be the second opinion. Let's see Rashi. Rashi says, "Megala panim b'Torah." What does it mean to misinterpret the Torah? Meis panim kapi oisik Torah. You show disrespect for those who teach, who are preoccupied in Torah. Megalim panim. What does it mean, megalim panim? Mishtam alon the chamim apikoris. The Mishnah understands that someone who misinterprets the Torah is worse than the apikoris. Apikoris, what's the word apikoris? So Rashi says the word apikoris comes from the word hefker. Afrikus sab'alma means you're just a person who's careless. Hefker means you have no rules, you have no boundaries, right? Someone who shames a Talmud Chacham when you get mad. It's not like you're consciously misinterpreting the Torah. You just don't have. You're like a person who has no rules. You have no structure. You have no discipline. You shame someone in front of the Talmud Chacham. Again, that's an expression of lack of discipline. That's hefker. Someone who's megal upon him b'Torah, like Menashe did, or maybe if you actually shame the Talmud Chacham himself, so that's actually shaming Torah. That's not just a behavior of lack of discipline. So he says, but according to the opinion that shaming the Talmud Chacham is itself an expression of lack of discipline, of hefker, is surely then someone who shames a friend is not a person who's in front of the Talmud Chacham, is not the higher level of Megal Panim Torah, someone who misinterprets the Torah. So what is it? So the Gemara answers, Rashi answers, Menashe ben Chizkiyahu. This is Menashe, the son of Chizkiyahu. Again, he himself, you have to remember that we look at it in hindsight, that Menashe was this horrible king. And he was a horrible king, at least the first part of his kingdom. It wasn't that many years, actually. I think he was over 30 years after Tshuva. But sometimes in 1 month you could do destruction that 50 years later is not going to help. So Menashe, but you have to remember, Menashe was the son of Chizkiyahu, the grandson of Yeshayahu. He had a lot of power, not just as king, but also as a person of influence, not just a person who's powerful. Influence is much more damaging because you influence how people think. And therefore, he started to change how people were. He started to misinterpret Torah, and the damage he did was irreparable. Okay, let's just finish the next piece. The Gemara says, other people say that the disagreement between Rab Chanina and Rav versus Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Shua ben Levi is actually not about apikoros, but megal panim Torah. That he says that megal panim Torah, what does it mean? Someone who doesn't interpret the Torah correctly. So Rabbi Yochanan says that's a person who shames the Talmud Chacham himself. That would mean, of course, that apikoros would be shaming the student. Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Shua ben Levi says that's the one who shames the student in front of the Talmud Chacham. So then what is an apikoros? So ikad demasn le'asei for the brayso. Dektani mikan amar Rabbi Lazar amagal panim b'Torah, and that's Rav Chanina. Now the Gemara asks the question, the same question but backwards. Bishlei mamanda amar vaz Talmud Chacham atzmi megal panim b'Torah having vaz chaver if ne Talmud Chacham apikoros having. Then what would be an apikoros? A person who shames someone else in front of the Talmud Chacham, which is a lesser of an offense. Alamanda amar vaz chaver b'fnei Talmud Chacham megal panim b'Torah. Is megal panim b'Torah. If you want to say that if I'm shaming a student in front of the teacher, that itself is a megal, someone who misinterprets the Torah. So what is an apikoros, which is less? So Rabbi Yosef that it's like the people who say, what does the hefker mean? He says this is, I'm not sure why that's considered less. Ma'ahanu la rabbana means they accept that there's rabbis. They said, what have the rabbis done for us? Right? What has the rabbi done for me lately? Lididu katani. He says they read the Bible for their own benefits, and they started the mission for their own benefits. They're doing all their studying for themselves. What's it in for me? Right? They don't see that the Talmud Chacham is working for them. It's all about me. They also say, what's the benefit? Again, back to the question of today's times, where they say, what's so important? Why do people have to learn Torah? What helps learning Torah? So that's an apikoros. Why? Because Rashi says, the whole world stands on the Torah scholar. Why do we have the right to live in peace, to have what we have, is because the people sit in yeshiva learning the whole day. The Gemara continues, let's just go a little further. Abaya said, Hi Megal Panim b'Torah, Namihu, that this is also a person who is not a person who says, what has the rabbis done? What is it? What do they help for the studying of Torah? That's also a person who misinterprets the Torah. Because it says, if not for brisi, which is Torah, day and night, people who study Torah day and night, then the chukos, the laws of the world, Shemayim V'aretz, are not going to have. The world stands on the people who keep the bris, the covenant of Torah. Rav Nachman says, Mihacha, Nami Shmamina, another verse, Nesasi l'chol hamakom ba'avuram, that like it says by Moshe Rabbeinu, that by Avraham Avinu, when he's arguing to save the city of Stone, the 5 cities of Stone, he said, is there a tzaddik in town? What do we see clearly? That had there been a tzaddik in town, the whole city would survive on that. So the person who doesn't recognize the importance of Torah. You don't agree with Torah if you don't recognize the power of Torah, Rashi says. The whole world stands on Torah, and you're saying you've done nothing for me. From here also we see from the story of Avram, means basically what the Gemara is saying is what's the person saying? You're studying Torah, what's that have to do with me? It's about yourself. You want to study Torah, what's that have to do with me? Why am I paying taxes so you should be able to study Torah? I have no benefit of your studying Torah. It's personal. It's a personal decision that you decide to study Torah. Why are you projecting your decision on me? And why is that called an apikaris? The Gemara says, because the whole world stands on the person who studies Torah. So another explanation is El Kagain, the Yosef Kamei Rabbe V'nafle Shmaisa B'duchta Achrita. Another definition of someone who's Megala Panim B'Torah is a person who's sitting in front of his teacher, and there's an idea that comes up from another subject, and he says, Hachi Amrin and Hasam. That's what it doesn't it say such and such law over there? And he doesn't say Hachi Amar Mar, this is what my master means. When he interjects, when he gets into the conversation of his teacher, he doesn't do it in a respectful way. Rava says another, I think if I remember correctly, I think Rava lived in Mechuzah, right? I think Rava lived amongst tough people. I think we had it before in Sanhedrin. Maybe Shuki, you have a better memory than me. I think we had it somewhere in the beginning of Sanhedrin that when Rava had to fix some laws, he couldn't do it in his area. He lived in a place of disrespectful people. It says Rava says, Hani Devei Binyamin, the people from Binyamin, the house of Binyamin, it's not the tribe of Binyamin, I guess it's a certain family, that Binyamin Asya, Binyamin the doctor, that they say, again, we're missing the bottom page, it says, Ma'ahani later Banami Ailam, what have the rabbis done for us? Actually, it does finish the page. What's their issue? The issue is, have they ever changed the law? Have they ever made a raven kosher? A raven's a non-kosher animal. Have they ever made the dove an unkosher and a non-kosher animal? A dove is kosher, right? So they're not doing anything. We want to have value over the Torah scholar. If we're paying their salary, we want them to be able to use their laws for our benefit. Rashi says, they never change anything in the Torah, basically. Give us a chiddush. We'll finish over here. He says Rava, so therefore when the Rava was obviously not in the best of, let's put it lightly, he didn't really appreciate the house of Binyamin the doctor, so I guess that was a family, or powerful family where he lived. Again, I think he lived in Mechuzah. So it says, Rava ki have a ma'aseh treifasa devei Binyamin kamei, when this family of Binyamin would come and bring a non-kosher bird. A treifa is a non-kosher bird. Ki have a chazi by time if he found a way to make it kosher. Right? That's the whole job of the rabbi. He looks at it and says, okay, the broken wing is it's not a punctured lung, etc. He would jab them and you say, look, you would have thought this was a non-kosher bird. I just made the raven kosher. When he found that the bird was non-kosher, means it was a treifa, which would disqualify the bird to be eaten, even if it's a kosher type of bird, but it has to be a treif doesn't mean that it's non-kosher animal. Treif means that the bird or the animal wouldn't survive a certain amount of time, and therefore it's considered prohibited to eat. So I took the yonah, which you thought was kosher, I made it non-kosher. Okay, let's just finish this Rashi. I'm going to end the class here. The kasharin alchu urva shehet is any matzi b'Torah el sefer memra. What basically Rava was saying to them, that where do I have the knowledge to say if this bird is kosher or not kosher? Those days, today, right? We go to the supermarket, we take it for granted. We go to the supermarket And if it says on it, Rabashkin's kosher meat or whatever, OU kosher meat, we buy it. We don't think twice. But back in the day, first of all, there's a background story to that as well. There's a whole group of rabbis and shochtim who check every single animal to see if the animal itself was kosher. That's why we have glat kosher. These are all parts to know if it's a treifa or not, if it's considered a prohibited or a permissible animal to eat. But at the same time, there's back in the day was, well, someone had a little chicken, you went in your backyard, you slaughtered it, and if you had a question, you went to the rabbi. These were just books and books of tshuvas on all these questions. The student of the Alter Rebbe who was told by the Alter Rebbe that he's going to have 3 questions on a bird's lungs. So these are that was what the rabbi is preoccupied with. I'm just going to say a little story I heard from someone that said in the name of my father's grandfather, Shmuel Levitin. He said that when he was a rabbi, he had it very hard because he would never, they would come to him with a bird if it was kosher. So he didn't want, he felt very responsible. On one side, there was a financial loss if he said it wasn't kosher. On the other side, if he made it kosher, obviously it wasn't halachically, and he would sit for hours and hours studying the bird to try to figure out the exact halacha if the bird was kosher or not. So that's what Rav was basically telling the people of Binyamin. You think that we don't do anything. Our Torah study comes to your use as well. This last piece. Rav Papa Amar going to Amri Hani Rabbanon. Someone says these rabbis, right? Be careful when you say these rabbis or those rabbis. That's itself a megalaparim b'Torah. Rav Papa Ishli v'Amr going Hani Rabbi v'Esav b'Tanisa. Once by mistake, he himself said those rabbis, and he had a fast. He took upon himself a fast to cleanse himself from that being a person who's disrespectful to Torah. So Rashi says, he says that Torah scholar doesn't give the proper respect. He should have said properly, our rabbis of this place, not just saying so and so. Okay. There's a difference between hani, these or those. These rabbis or those rabbis. So he talks kind of in 2 familiar terms. It's about a familiarity. You're too familiar with the rabbis, but that's a sign of lack of respect. All right, everyone. We took it all the way to the wire here. Thank you for joining. And Be'ezrat Hashem, we'll see you next week. And Chodesh Tov.